I'm super excited actually about this session. So this is three gentlemen that are probably smarter than most of us in this room. We have Paul Young, we have Todd Rice, and John Myberg. All three are intensivists, and they're going to be having the greatest fluid debate, and they're going to be talking about some of the pros and cons and using different types of fluid in the critically ill. Guys, take it away. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we exchanged a few emails about the greatest fluid debate, and it turned out that we agreed on everything. So this is just the greatest fluid chat, turns out. So here you go. So 45-year-old diabetic male, severe generalized abdominal pain, vomiting, rigors, looks really unwell, calls an ambulance. Ambulance comes, takes the patient to the hospital. Nurse sees the patient. High fever, high heart rate, low blood pressure. Nurse goes to doctor, says patient has septic shock. Doctor says okay. And there we are, that's the scenario. I also should mention the patient had a very, very sore tummy, and so septic shock, abdominal source, and the opening question for the panel really is, where do you stand in the philosophical spectrum from fluids first to presses first to the middle? Todd, why don't you go first?
Yep. I think the answer to this is clearly yes, and we can move on. No, I think from a practice standpoint, I would fit in the fluids first group, but I would be very cautious in the fact that this patient from me gets probably a liter of fluid, and if their blood pressure is not better, I'm moving to pressors pretty quickly.
Okay, John?
Well, I think what's important here is the context. Just take a deep breath in. We won't panic here. This guy's sick. He needs some urgent attention, but he won't die in the next 5 minutes. So context is important. He's 45 years old. He's diabetic. That's important. Why is it important? Because he may have an obtunded or inappropriate immune response. He may have autonomic neuropathy.
Okay, so while you guys are debating the philosophy of it, this is what Twitter said. And the emergency physician who's practical puts an ultrasound probe on the heart and says, John, stop waxing lyrical. The patient's hypovolemic. Let's give them a fluid bolus.
Well,
so what do you think about that, John?
well, my view is that he told me that there's two lungs and a heart, and that's pretty cool. Apart from that, I already knew he was hypovolemic. I looked at the patient and the history. I mean, it's a nice random number generator, but it won't tell me much more than I can get clinically in this context. So an echo is not harmful unless you do stupid things. It's maybe helpful in confirming something we already knew, but really I wouldn't put a lot of emphasis or use on an echo in this context.
So, John, you would say you would be in the category of an echo is generally unhelpful?
In this patient at this time.
Okay, what about you, Todd?
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would say also, although I'm more towards it may be helpful as opposed to almost assuredly unhelpful.
Okay, well, here's the answers. It turns out you're both wrong. So when I asked Twitter, they told me that an echo is generally helpful or even mandatory.
This is smack, mate. This is smack. This is ultrasound central, okay? I'm very scared right now.
Okay, so this, you'll notice here that the icon is called saline drip.
It's giving me chest pain.
Tell us about why balanced crystalloids are the way to go, Todd.
Yeah, so for me, almost everything I give is a balanced crystalloid. For mainly one big reason, which is that A, I have a bias. We have a study, 2 studies actually, that show balanced crystalloids improve a composite outcome of death or renal dysfunction. But I think the other part of this is key, which is there are a lot of studies out there, and you can cite many of them back to me where balanced crystalloids weren't beneficial, but I challenge you to find any where saline actually won. And the fact that saline hasn't won yet, and balanced crystalloids, at least at my institution, are the same cost as saline, readily available, this patient and almost every patient gets balanced crystalloid from me if I'm given fluid.
And what about you, John? What's your perspective?
Well, what we have is a choice of two shitty crystalloids and an even shittier colloid. So these are three shitty fluids. So what I would do is be very careful with all of them. Don't give a lot of fluid and go back to the context. The studies yet have not been done to answer this question. There are some studies from the US which suggest balanced. Balanced is a cool word. Buffered is even better. But really, the evidence isn't in yet. Contextually, this guy's got a abdominal problem, been vomiting. He's been vomiting up high chloride containing fluid. He may benefit from a bit of saline at this point in time to maybe create some chloride loss. But really, all we're going to give him is about a litre of fluid at this stage. So it doesn't matter. Balanced or saline is probably fine. But I agree with Todd, I'd probably go for a balanced up front. But they're both shitty.
I would add that when we talk about our studies a lot, we get a lot of questions that say, what about the patient that has, and unless that's followed by traumatic brain injury, I stop listening. And the reason is because every analysis that we've looked at in every subgroup, although balance doesn't win in all of those, again, it wins in a lot of those, and saline never wins. And I'm not the smartest guy on this stage, and probably not the smartest person even close to this stage. So for me, it's keep it simple, right? And keeping it simple is, if you're not a traumatic brain injury patient, I'm giving you balanced crystalloid. If I'm given fluid, I may not be giving fluid to you, but if I am, it's going to be a balanced crystalloid.
Okay, well, Alex is the smartest person on the stage. So here's the result of the poll. John and I were talking about this behind the stage. You would not believe how happy he is that no one chose what he describes as homicidal colloids as their first choice. Okay, so let's just say that this patient went to the operating theatre. They had their perforated gangrenous appendix chopped out. Over the next few days, they end up 8 litres positive, 8 kilograms heavier than they started out. They're on a moderate dose of noradrenaline, and based on your clinical judgment, you think that they're intravascularly deplete, but total body fluid overloaded. Tell us a little bit about what your thinking would be in this scenario. Either of you, whoever speaks first can go.
Well, I have a problem with the whole concept. I would never call this patient at day 3 intravascularly depleted unless there was a bucket of blood on the floor and fluid was pissing out of him. It's not possible. At day 3, this patient is waterlogged, as you can see by the weight gain. And the reason why he's still on a ventilator at 3 days after an appendix is an important question. Wake him up, pull the tube out, for Christ's sake. and that will fix him. That will fix him. So I really question the view of a patient in ICU after 2 or 3 days being depleted. And you cannot tell me any test, passive leg raising, pulse wave variation, echocardiograms, all the stuff, they're all wrong. It's a clinical decision. And your priority now is to cut the fluids back, particularly the maintenance fluids and the drug fluids, wake him up, get him to pee it out, and he'll be fine.
Yeah, I don't think we argue here. I agree. This patient needs to pee, and the question to me is, do you let them do it on their own? Do you force it with a diuretic? Or maybe even being provocative, do you force it with albumin and a diuretic together? I think it depends a little bit on the patient. I also agree with John. If this patient's still intubated, I say, what the hell has happened in my ICU, right? Somebody was on vacation. Did a doctor see this patient for the last 2 days? You know, those sorts of questions. Because he should be extubated and made to pee, whether he does that on his own or we force it.
Okay, so there's 2 take-home points there. 1, my scenario is shit. And 2, there's no such thing as a hypovolemic patient in intensive care unless there's blood on the floor.
And preferably not your blood.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So So this actually was the most provocative response from Twitter, I think, when I asked this question. I mean, quite a few people commented that the scenario was shit, but we've covered that. We've covered that already. I thought it was really interesting, actually, how first of all, more than a quarter of people wanted to give more fluid to a patient who already had 8 kilos of extra fluid and had generalised organ edema. That makes no sense to me. Do nothing. Well, I mean, I like that as a general strategy for everything. In fact, I can't remember if it was Smack or somewhere else, but I tweeted at one time that the art of intensive care is just to do more and more of less and less until all you're doing is going for coffee breaks.
That's right.
Okay, so Alex, have you got some questions for Twitter for us?
Yeah, so currently homicidal colloid is the #1 trending hashtag in Sydney at the moment, so that's a good word. A comment from what I presume is a US colleague. What do we think about the compulsion to give 30 mils per kilo, or you're financially penalised?
Excellent question. Put it in the bin. It is too much fluid and doesn't work. I know the guidelines say that, but that is based on zero evidence. Zero. It was originally described as the volume to target initial resuscitation. That's it. And consider it, you gave me 30 mils per kilo at 90 Ks. That is almost 3 litres of homicidal crystalloids. Don't do it. So really, consider it carefully in the context of the patient. And our patient here, in my view, given the history and the presentation, in the initial phases, probably needs no more than 2 litres, if that.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree. I never understood where the 30 mils per kilo came from. I think that in general, the people that say they do the 30 mils per kilo have a hard time weighing patients because they're not given close to that. At least in the United States, we have lots of kilos in our patients, and that results in lots of mils. I agree. I would treat the patient and not try and target a number.
So I guess the other point that John raised earlier on, which I think is worth highlighting again, is that these are all shitty fluids, and so these are all drugs. And I think that one of the problems of history, in a way, has been that fluids have been treated differently to drugs and that people have thought about them differently from drugs. And I think every time you go to prescribe a fluid, you should think, is this drug indicated now? Because every fluid has side effects, like every drug has side effects. And that's my view anyway. Alex, have you got anything else for us? Or?
Yep, and what fluid would the experts recommend for DKA and why?
Can I answer this?
Yeah.
Anything you want. It's like, it's almost impossible to kill someone with diabetic ketoacidosis, no matter what you do to them.
I would add that the fluid you should give should have insulin in it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. It should contain insulin.
Well, it's a bit like the fluid of choice in septic shock. It's noradrenaline.
Yep. There you go.
No, I agree. The saline occupancy for DKA is almost evangelical. It is oceanically stupid. I mean, really, you give some to correct the water deficit, which can be quite a lot in some patients, a couple of litres. Choose the fluid of your choice, which you like, titrate it against the serum osmolality, and do it carefully. And that may be that you may start using plasmolite or balanced salt solutions or harpins or ringers. But a point may come when you've got to change that because the indications have changed based on some clinical basis. Recipe medicine is fine to prevent disasters. It isn't fine to achieve excellence.
Okay, well, should we do one more question from the Twitter sphere, Alex? Have you got one? Or?
Someone wants to know what your opinions are about third space losses, and I would argue, whether do you even care? That's my addendum. Sorry to append.
Was that your editorial? Or
that's my bit on the end. The question is, think about the third space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure I care.
Okay, it's fair.
The next patient who dies from peripheral edema in my ICU will be the first patient that dies from peripheral edema in my ICU.
Well, you know, one way I think that it's useful to think about the scenario, and I kind of reflecting on John's point, you know, this is a patient who's had a gangrenous appendix chopped out and it's now in a bucket. You know, so this patient will not die unless you make an error, right? So all the fluid that the patient's had, they're going to have to give back to you before they leave the hospital in one form or another, right? So if they're clearly not going to die, then first of all, you don't need to give them any more because they'll just have to give that back too. And second of all, you know, you may as well get it back as soon as you can because then they can leave quicker.
Just to add to that, if I may, the third space, as we understand it...
Oh, sorry, I forgot about the third space.
That's all right.
Carry on. Question.
It's cool answering the question, okay, right? The third space, as we have been taught and been told, does not exist. Okay, it's a conception that it's clearly flawed in physiology. The third space that we are creating is interstitial edema in every organ. The brain, the myocardium, the gut, the lung, the kidney, the liver, the skin. I have no doubt in my mind that a lot of the delirium that we see in our patients is due to osmotic shifts caused by too much fluid. A lot of the ILS we see is due to gut edema, and that's the MOSIs, liver dysfunction. Okay? The third space is iatrogenic, and it kills people.
Okay, so the counter on the screen I can see in front of me is in the negative numbers, which means we've talked for longer than we're allowed to. So here's some take-home messages that I made up yesterday after someone told me that the problem with all the talks from academic people at SMAC was all they said was that nothing works and no one should ever do anything. And that no one found that useful. So avoid iatrogenitis. Fluids are drugs. Do not use homicidal colloids. Take fluids away early, and remember that it's not you that makes the patient better, it's time that makes the patient better. Thank you very much, everyone. It's lunchtime.